All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat, and I have to apologize to you guys. We recorded our podcast episode today. It was a great podcast. We had a great guest on, Gio from SwitchRPG, great YouTube channel, great RPG podcast, all about the Switch. It was just fantastic. You guys would have loved it. And I forgot that I was messing with the settings in OBS and it only recorded my audio. It didn't record their audio. So that ruined the whole podcast because you guys can't hear our conversation. You can only hear me talking. So obviously I'm not going to put that out there because that would not be interesting at all to listen to. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through some of these topics that we covered and give my personal take on it. Hopefully that's interesting to you guys. And I apologize for not doing my due diligence. And what I will do in the future is I will make sure that I do my due diligence to make sure that we do have the full conversation recorded going forward. 142 episodes, guys. I apologize. First time. But before we get into the topics for today, I do want to stress that if you are looking for another YouTube page similar to ours, but more focused on the Switch side of things, specifically Switch RPGs, go check out SwitchRPG. Awesome YouTube channel. I mean, they're putting content out regularly. They have their podcast that goes out, and then they also have gameplay that they're doing. They have a website with reviews and just general material regarding Switch RPGs. And Gio in particular was just such a good guest. He was very personable. He got a lot of laughs out of us. He really brought a dynamic that kind of broke the ice with some of the topics. And I can't stress it enough. Go check out their YouTube channel because we had a really good time talking with him, and it'd be great to have him on in the future. And hopefully we'll try to make that happen. I already reached out to apologize, and he was like, "Don't worry about it, man. I did the same thing one time." So very good guy. And I really just, again, go check out SwitchRPG. But the topics today, we're going to be talking about the Nintendo Mini Direct that happened on Monday. There was a lot of negativity surrounding that, but there were also some interesting announcements with that. So I'm going to go over that and give some general thoughts on that Direct. Also, Paper Mario, the Origami King impressions. I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. And then perhaps next week, because Eric is a huge Paper Mario fan, he's probably going to want to give his thoughts on the game then as well. So we'll make sure to make that happen because I know he's really passionate about the series. And then I'm going to talk about my most desired RPG that we want for the Switch. If this seems a little self-centered, it is. And that was not the way it was intended. But, we're going to make the best of this, guys. You're on this journey with me. So let's get into the first topic here. So we have the Nintendo Mini Direct that happened on Monday. Now, when this first popped up on my radar, I actually thought that this was better than it was. I saw that they were doing a remaster for Shin Megami Tensei 3, specifically Nocturne, and I have not played that game. I want to play that game. I know it's a PS2 classic, and I was excited to hear that they were doing an HD remaster for that. And then I also saw we finally got Shin Megami Tensei 5 news. Guys, I'm telling you, I went back and tried to look when was the last time we covered SMT 5, and it was episode 22. This is episode 142. That's a long time. The only trailer that we had seen before this was for the Nintendo Switch launch. It's been a very, very long time. And so I was excited to finally see some news on this because we had been checking regularly. Doing an RPG podcast like this, we're constantly looking for the best topics to talk about and also the topics we're most excited to talk about. And so that naturally has just led us to constantly looking for SMT5 news. And there's really not been anything since that trailer. There was a small interview in 2018 where the director said that he did not feel comfortable saying the game was in development or he didn't want to say it was in a development status because they were understaffed and Atlas was prioritizing that staff towards other projects, probably Persona 5 or, other games that are unannounced. So that was it didn't inspire confidence, I should say. So I was really excited to finally get a trailer for this and to get a release window of 2021. So I thought this was really exciting. And I went to go watch this Nintendo Mini Direct, and I watched all about 9 minutes of it. And I got to be honest, there really wasn't much else there to talk about, at least on the English side of things. There was Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer, DLC packs. Gio talked about that a little bit, that he had played it. Eric said he completed the game entirely, which baffles me, but it's a rhythm-based Zelda spin-off game. So take that for what you will. I saw rhythm-based when the game was initially launched, and I thought, not for me. But there's 3 DLC packs coming, so I guess that's pretty cool. Gio did say that it is an RPG, so maybe we'll have to check it out. There was also Rogue Company, which is a first-person shooter. It's out in early access. Kind of cool, not really my thing. Then there was some kind of wrestling game. I don't even remember the name of it, but I don't really care. So that's about all I'm going to say on that. Then we had the Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne remaster. We saw that there's going to be a release window of 2021. And so that's pretty cool. And then we have a Shin Megami Tensei 5 release window of 2021 as well. So all in all, not a bad Nintendo Direct Mini, but people were disappointed. Now, I think it's important to point out that the Japanese one also had 2 other RPG announcements that are important to bring up. First off was Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. And this looks like a new IP to me, but it does have an interesting art aesthetic and definitely seems like something I would be interested in. I assume that this game, I guess I shouldn't assume, I would like to think that this game will come out in where I live in the States, or hopefully somewhere where it's in English and I can import it and play it. But it does look pretty awesome, and I would like to see this come to the Switch in English-speaking territories. And then there was Atelier Ryza 2. I probably mispronounced that, but I've never played any of the games or the other game in the series, but apparently they're pretty good for the people that enjoy it. So this is coming to the Switch this winter in Japan, and it's also coming to the PlayStation 4 and Steam. So that's cool. And I'm sure this game, I would think, is definitely going to come to the West, I would think. That would seem weird if it didn't. We might get a different release window, but regardless, looks pretty cool. In regards to the biggest announcements that we had, specifically Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne and Shin Megami Tensei 5, I would have to say from what we saw, I think that I was more excited personally with Nocturne, mostly because I'm not really happy with what they showed with SMT5. It was good to finally see some stuff with it, but Shin Megami Tensei 5, I felt like this game has been in development for 3 or 4 years. Even if they're understaffed, I presume they were working on it. There didn't seem to be any actual in-game footage. There was, I guess I shouldn't say that. There was footage that looked to be probably in-game, but I didn't see any kind of UI or menus, or not that I want to see menus, but I want to see the battle system. I want to see, more of the world and running around in the world and just get a sense of what the game's going to be like, because I've never played an SMT game. I've played Persona 4, which is a spinoff, and that's about the most I've gotten from it. And this series is very much not in that vein. It's much darker from what I understand. And so, yeah, I'm just not happy with what we saw. I'm not dissatisfied. I'm excited we got to see more, but I don't really know what the premise of the game is going to be. Eric explained that the SMT games are generally about speaking with monsters and trying to convince them to join your party after you battle them. And that seems cool, but what sets this one apart? And I think the visual aesthetic looks really cool. I like the airy music. I like the fact that this is a horror RPG, and I think that's really cool. but I definitely want to see more. So I'm going to put SMT 5 in the want to see more category. Definitely going to pick it up most likely when it comes out, depending on what else is coming out at the time. But it's definitely in the most likely going to pick up category. However, for Nocturne, that is a known quantity to me. I know that it's a classic on the PS2. It's a little weird. The Metacritic score, I think, is around an 83, but the user score is around a 5.8. And that's quite a bit lower than I thought it was going to be, because I hear people talk about this game all the time as a classic. And then when I looked into it a little bit deeper, I think some of that lower score, some of those lower scores is coming from people that are not really hardcore RPG players, or maybe it's not their favorite genre. It's their third or fourth favorite genre. And that's because the gameplay specifically is kind of difficult from what I understand. Now, if you played the game, let me know in the comments if I got this right. But from what I was looking at with RPG Fan, our media partner, they gave the game a 9.2 and said it was just a fantastic RPG on the PlayStation 2. You know, they've been covering games since the late 90s, so they're a good source to go back and see kind of what was the general opinion back then, or another opinion. And so one part from the review I pulled out that I thought was interesting was they said, casual gamers, however, are advised to take note that Nocturne offers a significantly greater challenge than your average RPG. Dungeons are long, bosses are menacing, and the random encounter rate is typically high. Enemies exhibit a fetish for surprisingly effective instant death attacks, and there are very few safe spots free from combat. The player will engage in battles throughout town areas as well as dungeons. For some gamers, these obstacles will serve to sweeten the nectar of triumph, while others may become easily discouraged and frustrated with the seemingly cheap tactics employed by some of Nocturne's nastier foes. I think right there probably centers in on why the game did not quite resonate with all people, but Eric pointed out in this podcast that he thinks that this game is probably going to have an easy mode or a casual mode similar to Xenoblade Chronicles, and I have to agree with him. I think that that only makes sense if that was an area of criticism. It's a fairly easy thing to do, I would imagine, and it would gain a lot of following with the game and really bolster SMT5's sales. So I agree with Eric on that front. It's going to have a casual mode. So I'm hoping that it's a good game regardless for other people, but I think that I'm going to enjoy it. So moving on from there, I just want to talk briefly about some of the negativity surrounding this direct. And in general, it seems like there was several different camps where people fell into with the thoughts on this game. In particular, it seems like there's a group of people that I think are being completely unreasonable. And then I think that there are a group of people that kind of have a point. And then there's people like us that are big RPG fans, and we thought this was great. But let's get into this, okay? So the fans that, or the group of people that I think are being a little unreasonable, are the people that basically were expecting Breath of the Wild 2 to be announced at this Nintendo Direct Mini. This is a Nintendo Direct Mini. They went out of their way to say it was a mini Direct. That's not the format that you unveil Breath of the Wild 2. I really don't think that's the best place to do that. So I find that this is a rather small but loud group of people that are criticizing this for that reason. I think if they're being honest, they didn't really expect Breath of the Wild 2 or Metroid to be here, but they're just commenting on the fact that they're Nintendo fans and they have a Nintendo Switch. They weren't really Xenoblade Chronicles fans. They weren't really Pokemon fans. So there's not been a really big announcement for them to look forward to for 2020. And maybe they didn't like Paper Mario. So they're kind of in this boat where they're not SMT fans either. So it's just a series of just games they're not interested in. And it seems like Nintendo's not going to have anything for them for this year. And if you fall in that camp, I would say that, it's July. There could be some more announcements coming up. I definitely think there's at least a few. And I think that the Switch has been on a roll lately with 2 to 3 years of just awesome announcement after awesome announcement. And we're kind of hitting a lull right now where Nintendo just needs, and people working on games for Nintendo, they need some time to make some games. And they can't just keep making one series of announcements after another. But I am sympathetic to the fact that you own a Nintendo Switch, you want to have something to look forward to, and you just want Nintendo to unveil something. They got to have something. So I can definitely sympathize with that. And the other area that I can also sympathize with is the fact that, let's be real, Nintendo overhypes everything. And that wasn't really a problem last year or the year before. It was a little bit of a problem, but it wasn't a huge deal because they had announcements to back it up. I mean, we would see games like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition announced in August 2019, and we'd see a release date for less than a year away. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Or the moment I remember seeing Witcher 3 coming to Switch, after we had been talking about this rumor that Witcher 3 was coming to Switch, and there was no way. And we were laughing at this, that the Switch could even run Witcher 3. And then at that E3 presentation, I saw the trailer for Witcher 3 on Switch, and I jumped out of my chair. I mean, these were exciting announcements, and these are ports too, right? But they also have other games that ended up being a breakout success. We had Fire Emblem Three Houses. We had Astral Chain. I mean, we had, I was going to say Pokemon Sword and Shield. I thought it did very well. People really enjoyed it for the most part. You know, we had some reservations with it, but it was a perfectly fine Pokemon game. So they've definitely been really good with the announcements and the games in the past. And it just seems to me that it's inevitable that this was going to come up. But Nintendo's still been promoting stuff like nothing's changed. And I think that they just need to address the fact that they're working on it. You know, we're in a quarantine right now. We're in a situation where developers are not able to work as quickly or as efficiently, and that's going to impact development. They even addressed that at the beginning of their presentation, but I think that they could be a little bit more vocal about it because people are wanting to know. I spent X amount of dollars, whether it's on the Switch Mini or the Switch Portable, or the standard Switch, and they want to know what's coming out. And to just walk through the past couple of announcements and really see this plain error, at least in my eyes, is we had Pokemon Snap. Great announcement. Then Nintendo said, hey, we need our own separate announcement for this next Pokemon game. It could not possibly fit in the same presentation that we had with Pokemon Snap and the Pokemon Sword and Shield show off. We need our own separate presentation next week for this mystery Pokemon game. And people were excited. Their imagination was going wild. Understandably so. And it ended up being a Pokemon MOBA game, which no one really seemed to care about, or at least not many people. So that was really disappointing, but Nintendo hyped it up. Then we had this, Nintendo Treehouse event where they had a new unveiling of a game and everyone thought it was going to be Metroid. And then Nintendo said, no, it's a third-party game. And even then, people were really excited that Nintendo went out of their way to bring this up. And people sat through 30 minutes of Paper Mario demonstration, right? There was 150,000 people watching. And then suddenly it was Bakugan. This was the game that they were hyping up. And I didn't particularly have a problem with Bakugan. I know there's fans out there that like Bakugan, but that's not the type of game that you would promote like that. That does a disservice to the developers that worked on that game. That does a disservice to the players that like that game, because now not only is that a game that has a niche following, that is a game that people are going to subconsciously think this game sucks, right? This is the only thing people know about Bakugan. A lot of people that, oh, that was that game that nobody wanted to play. I'm not buying that, right? So the people were very disappointed about that. And the viewership went from 150,000 people down to 50,000 people. That's crazy, right? The moment Bakugan started showing, people were very disappointed. So with this Nintendo Direct Now, or this Nintendo Direct Mini, we can follow this a little further. And the only thing of worth of note here was really SMT Nocturne and SMT 5, for us anyways, and our audience. And a lot of people were really upset about that, because if you're not excited about SMT, then there's not much else for you to grab a hold of here, because it kind of sucks if you fall into that camp. And so I wonder, why didn't Nintendo rearrange their schedule a little bit, and perhaps they could have had Pokemon Snap, Bakugan, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne Remaster, Shin Megami Tensei 5, have all this stuff collectively together in one presentation. They could have put the Pokemon MOBA stuff in there. They could have put some Paper Mario demonstrations in there. They could have had a cross-code release date, and it wouldn't have been the greatest Nintendo Direct ever, but I think it would have been a little bit better received to have all these announcements together, especially with Pokemon Snap. That gained a lot of positive attention, and then also the Shin Megami Tensei stuff in there as well. I think that this would have just rounded out to be a pretty decent Direct. And, so I'm all over the place with this. I think that the Direct itself was fine for what it was, but I do see where there were some errors in how things have been done in the past. And at a more macro level, just going forward, I can see where people are coming from that are disappointed or frustrated with Nintendo at this point in time. But I don't think this is going to last. I think that Nintendo has an announcement or two that are still in their sleeve, and it's going to come out. It's going to get people excited, and we're going to be sitting there not even remembering this was ever a time. I think that Nintendo just realizes that once they have a slew of just awesome announcements, once they show off Breath of the Wild 2, once they show off Metroid, I mean, you guys are not going to be complaining. So I think they realize that, and they're just playing their cards right now. And that is what it is. But anyways, so that's my thoughts on the Nintendo Direct Mini. Some cool announcements, but maybe it could have been better. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. All right, on to Paper Mario Origami King impressions. Again, we'll go ahead and have Eric give his thoughts on the game next week, because he's a big fan of the game and the series in general, and we definitely want to have him give his opinion on that, because he is going to be the Paper Mario expert in this conversation. But as a newbie coming here, I'll give you some of my Paper Mario background here. So I've played the Super Mario RPG, which isn't Paper Mario, but it's apparently somehow related. I don't know. Apparently it's considered a cousin or the origins of the series before it went to a new company. I get it. So I never played Paper Mario 64. I played a 1,000-Year Door, or whatever it's called, on the GameCube, and I played maybe 7 hours of it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. And it's a game that I want to play more of, but that's about all I have for Paper Mario that I've played until now with Paper Mario Origami King. So I've put about maybe 5 or 6 hours into the game, and I gotta be honest, it's better than I thought. It's not actually a very deep and meaningful RPG experience. I think that it's very light on the RPG elements, and we kind of talked about this in the podcast, but I really think that this game is just something that is good for if you want to just veg on the couch for an hour after work and not really put a lot of thinking into it, right? With certain jobs, like I work in accounting, for example, some days I come home and the idea of messing with Xenoblade Chronicles inventory management, or trying to, figure out which short sword I want to sell in Berseria, Tales of Berseria, I think that this is something that is not really something I'm looking forward to when I come home, right? So being able to just come home and mess with Paper Mario is pretty cool. It is pretty fun in that regard, but you're not going to get much more out of it, at least from what I played. Eric did go over because he's farther in the game, that the game does get a little bit more complicated. But in general, from reviews I've seen also, they kind of mimicked a similar thing that, generally it's pretty easy. It does have complexity in certain spots, but it's not Dark Souls. Okay. So let's just get that out there. So first thing I would say in addition to that is the battle system. It's this ring-based battle system. And if you don't know how it works, or you haven't seen anything on it, I should say, it's basically a turn-based system that takes place in a ring, and you're given a couple of turns to move enemies around. And your goal is to get the enemies in a particular formation that will allow you to attack all the enemies at once with a particular moveset. And it's pretty fun. It's pretty strategic. There's a timer. There's a lot of things going on. It makes it feel very engaging, and it's got some good animations, and it's a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun. The problem I have with it is it's turn-based. It whisks me away to a separate screen, so it takes more time. And since there's not a level up mechanic in Paper Mario Origami King, I don't know why I'm doing these battles. There's no incentive for me to be doing these battles. I defeat the battle, and then I get coins, I get confetti, and these are things I get from doing practically anything else in Paper Mario. So I started skipping a lot of these battles because it didn't impact my character, didn't make my character stronger. I had more coins than I knew what to do with. There was always a place for me to find more confetti. It wasn't really a problem for me to find confetti. I was just out. And if I did run out and there wasn't a tree for me to shake, then I would just do a battle and get more confetti. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. Confetti in this world is just paper confetti, and it's basically you collect confetti and then you can use it to patch up holes in the world, which will reveal either gold coins or doors and buildings that were ripped off or things like that. So it's important, but it's not something that's exclusive to these battles. So I just avoid the battles where I can, and I haven't really felt encumbered by that. So Eric did mention, I believe, or maybe it was Geo, that they found that there were on occasion an item or something like that that you could get that would be good for completionists. So it does have some merit in that regard. But that's my big problem with the battle system and the ring system, is that it's just, there's no reason for me to do it outside of just the enjoyment of the battle system itself. There is a more action-oriented battle system that has you in the beginning using just a hammer, and you can hit like weak spots on enemies. It's kind of weird that they do both, but I actually enjoy that a little bit more because, I can run away, I can dodge, it's a little more active, and it's more in the moment. I don't have to wisp away to the separate screen. And not that I have a problem with that usually with turn-based games, but usually there's more incentive for me to do that. Now, on a positive note, I would say that this game has been praised for having a very fun atmosphere and very witty writing. And I gotta admit that the presentation aspect, the fun atmosphere, the characters, this all just brings this world to life in a way that not a lot of games have. And I think that's really what makes this series special from what I've seen. And I'm really glad that I got to experience that with this game, because that is really the thing that keeps me coming back for more, is the world itself. It's hilarious. It's entertaining. It's nostalgic. It's everything that you would want in a Paper Mario game in terms of the world. Just to give you an example of some of the kind of hilarious writing that you'll find. At one point early in the game, you get to talk to these trees in this forest. And one of the trees tells Paper Mario, if you talk to him, "I had a friend that was turned into paper. Say hi to him for me." And it's just a small line, but it just cracked me up, And there's lots of little lines like that throughout this entire game that it just really brings things to life and adds a lot of character like that just isn't found in a lot of games these days. And I think that's very worth mentioning, that it's just a lot of fun to play for that reason. And the premise itself, it centers around King Ollie, who is turning paper characters into origami characters who once turned into origami. They serve King Ollie now. Whatever. I'm going with it. I thought it was a creative way to interpret this world. I mean, they keep having to come up with something new, with some new premise, because it is a Paper Mario series, right? And so I found that that was perfectly fine and enjoyable, and I'm having a good time with it for that reason. It's just those battles kind of get in the way from me experiencing the story, and so that's really what's keeping me in there for. There's other elements with the gameplay that I want to touch on. I think that Eric and Geo can touch on it a little bit more, or I know definitely Eric because he's a lot farther than me, but specifically, one of the elements I found to be a little weird, it was kind of funny. There's this 1,000 hands or whatever it's called. I think I'm getting it kind of wrong, but that's basically what it's called. Something along those lines. But it's this thing that lets Mario grab things from long distances. And it basically, you have to use motion controls on your Switch controller to, move the hands all around. And then once the hands are floating over a particular area that you can grab onto, you hit the grab button and it can tear a piece of the wall back or something like that, and it'll reveal hidden doors or something along those lines. Sometimes it's, things up in trees that you can grab, and it's a pretty cool mechanic, but I gotta be honest, I really don't like the motion controls with it. I feel ridiculous doing it. It makes it impossible for me to, it's not impossible, but it's difficult to use it a lot of times in a very efficient way. I was recording footage for RPG Fan for their review, and I felt bad because I kind of look like an idiot with my gameplay because some of the stuff took me like 30 seconds to get. And Geo mentioned that like he tried it once and he was just like, no, I'm turning the motion controls off. There's got to be a way to do this because I am not doing that. So I found it really weird. It does some other stuff too, where it has you like kind of like bang down, right, with your controller, like you're hammering something or hitting something. I think that going forward, I'm probably going to turn that off. It's a cool mechanic, but not really something I'm into. So that's about all I've experienced with the gameplay and just stuff like that. I also want to note that it did have a very fun soundtrack, but I wish the game was more of an RPG for me personally, but I do think that is a good kind of veg state game that is good to come home and just kind of play for an hour and just kind of tune out. And, the stakes are never that high where if you get a game over, you basically get to restart where you're at. It's a very easy to play game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to know that going in and know what you're getting for. So to wrap this up, do I think this is worth the $60 price tag? I think at this point, it just depends on who you are. I think that if you are a big Paper Mario fan, you've probably already picked this game up. And so you can comment on that yourself. But I think that if you're on the fence, maybe see if you can borrow this game before you pick it up. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it for the $60 price tag. But I do think there are some people out there that are just not going to go into it with the right mindset. And they're not going to be able to appreciate it for what it is. And so for that reason, I would have to say, as just a blanket statement, maybe wait for the price to come down. Geo pointed out in our podcast that this is a Mario game, so it's going to be $60 until the Switch 5. Joking, but not by much here. But maybe for Black Friday, maybe something like that, you can get the game at a more cheaper price, maybe $55, $50, maybe 40 if you're lucky. And that might be an option. Eric brought up that, and I thought it was a good point, that they should have a demo similar to Dragon Quest XI, and, where it lets you play 10 hours of the game. That would be a really good and consumer-friendly thing for Nintendo to do, but they're not going to do that. They've shown no interest to do that. And so maybe go check some gameplay out on YouTube. See if it looks like it's like a Let's Play or something like that. See if it's something that would appeal to you. But I think for me personally, I think $60 is a little high for the types of games that I enjoy, but I don't think it's a bad game at all. And I would see if you can perhaps play it before you pick it up. All right, moving on to the most desired RPG for me coming to Switch, or the game that I want to come to Switch. I'm trying to remember specifically what everyone picked for coming to Switch, but I guess I'll let them kind of say and comment on what they have, and I can talk about what I have here. But for me personally, I was all about the HD Xenosaga trilogy. I think it's crazy that Bandai Namco owns it and they haven't done anything with it and they don't intend to do anything with it. I think it's crazy that the game failed a keyword market test because Xenoblade Chronicles, which is was made by the same person, very similar name, similar lore. The game apparently failed a keyword market test, and Xenoblade Chronicles has done very well. So that I just find baffling that it has not done better than it has. So it's unlikely that we're probably going to get a port to the Switch, but that would be one that I just need to come to the Switch. If that happened, I would be so excited. I think part of the problem is there's multiple parties that own a piece of the game, so the profits are split with any re-release. However, I still feel like somebody can do something. I mean, Bandai Namco, if you're not going to do anything with this, sell it, because it's just a property that's just sitting there. Sell it to Nintendo. I'm sure they'll buy it. Give them a good price on it. You'll make some money. Nintendo can do something with it. We'll all be happy. But if you're not going to do anything with it, don't just sit on it. I mean, for the love of God, come on now. But anyways, so that's the game that I really want to pick. And, I've never played the third game. And I really want to own the third game. It's $100 to own. I guess I could emulate it. But, it's just something I want to re-experience on the Switch, be able to play it with handheld mode, be able to play it, switching between my TV and handheld mode. I know I can emulate it, but it's just, I like to play it on the big screen, and it's just a hassle for me to do that with my computer, and I would rather, just for convenience sake, be able to play it on the Switch. And so that would be my most desired game to come to the Switch. Some other ideas that I did have were the Mass Effect trilogy. I think that would be an excellent port to the Switch. Eric brought up that Mass Effect 3 was on the Wii U. I actually didn't realize that. So if that's the case, I definitely don't think it would have a problem at all coming to the Switch. And if you've never played Mass Effect 1, or you haven't played it in a long time, it has aged okay. I think the story's still great. The presentation in a lot of ways is great. But man, running across these big maps, the screen has to load. There's frame drops. I mean, it could use a remaster. And I think on the Switch, it would just be so fun to be able to experience that whole story again. And I think it would be a really good time. Gio brought up when I brought this up that he was not sure. I don't want to misquote him exactly, so perhaps he can clarify if you all want to ask him. But he brought up that, this was a good story, but is this really something that would be ported now, essentially? Is this like, what is the reasoning for it? And I think it's a fair point, because if they're not going to come out with another Mass Effect game in the near future, well, why would they port this to the Switch? But there's those rumors out there, and it seems like it's probably true. So I don't know, but it seems to make sense that basically the rumors are that we're going to have a Mass Effect trilogy. So I think that it makes sense that if they're going to have a Mass Effect game coming out, that they would port the trilogy just to get people excited about it. But, regardless, I think it could have easily just drop it on the Switch. I think it would make money. I think it makes sense. I think it's something people want. And why not? Why not do it? Some other ones that I thought would be cool was the Final Fantasy Tactics. War of the Lions, we have that on the PSP. I don't know if there was a Steam version. I need to check on that. But regardless, it'd be cool if we got that on the Switch. I think it's crazy that we have not gotten that on the Switch, and we've gotten all these other Final Fantasy games. So it'd be really cool to experience that. Of course, one can dream, and I would love to have a Shadow Hearts collection coming to the Switch, but this has a more dire fate than the Xenosaga trilogy because Shadow Hearts, the company that made that game and those games, they don't even make video games anymore. They make slot machines. So they don't probably even have the know-how to do this or the original game files. They just own the IP and they're not doing anything with it. They're not making Shadow Hearts slot machines as far as I'm aware. So very unfortunate, but I would like to see a collection come to the Switch. And some other games that I could think of was Last Story, Lost Odyssey. It'd be really cool to get those. I love to have Xenogears, Legend of Heroes games. I think it'd be cool to have those Persona series. And so it'd be really cool to have those. Gio brought up Radiant Historia. He's heard a lot of good things about that. He thought that would be really good. He also thought that, God, I'm drawing a blank on this game. Kingdoms of Amular Reckoning. So this particular game, he really enjoyed it. He said he felt like it was a good alternative to Skyrim and, the other Elder Scrolls games in a way. It's obviously different, but he had a good time with it. So it'd be really cool to be able to play that in portable mode. I think that, oh God, I'm trying to remember what Stan and Eric said. Regardless, we'll have to revisit this topic in the future and kind of talk about that because it was a really fun discussion to have. And let me move on here to, well, first off, let me comment also because I thought it was a really good discussion. We kind of talked about some of the more retro games, the SNES games, and the fact that these have not been ported to the Switch and whether or not the Nintendo console is bottlenecking this coming to the Switch. And basically the general idea is we have games like Mario RPG, we have a bunch of Square games, Final Fantasy 1 through 6, we have Dragon Quest 4 through 6 that have not come to Switch. And there's so many other great SNES games from other game developers that have not come to the Switch. And my speculation was that perhaps Nintendo is pushing them to have these games come to their online console. And it's hard for me to believe that Square would let Chrono Trigger come to the online console over just having it in the store, because I feel that would make a lot more money if Square would just let somebody buy it for $5. But maybe they can do both. But anyways, the general idea was that conclusion we came to was that Nintendo is probably working on this. Other companies are probably working on this. It's just more difficult than we realize. And these games want to be spread out. They don't want to do them all at once. Square just put Dragon Quest 1 through 3, for example, on the Switch. I mean, I would love to have that that Final Fantasy 4 3D remake come to the Switch. I think that would be a really cool thing to have on the Switch for sure. And, I just want more of these SNES games to come to the Switch. They have a great catalog of games. Let's get some Earthbound. I mean, come on. It should be easy to knock it out of the park, especially right now while Nintendo's getting criticized. But I think Gio and Eric and Stan were right that, it's probably more difficult than we realize. So I'm going to kind of back off a little bit on my criticisms in that regard. So anyways, I think that is all we're going to have for our podcast today. If you stuck with me for this long, I really appreciate it. I know this was not as exciting as having everyone on again, but I just couldn't ask Gio to come on again for Wednesday. That would have been too much to ask because he already took time out of his evening for Tuesday. And again, I apologize to you guys for not having that, but make sure you go check out SwitchRPG. It was a great, great time talking with Gio, and I think you guys are really going to like his podcast and his personality and his channel over there. And I mean, they got a website you can also check out as well. I'll make sure to have all that information in the description so you guys can go check out that, subscribe, check out their content, and just support them because really doing some cool stuff over there. But other than that, I think that's going to be it for this week. Next week, we will have a standard podcast. I believe Eric will be comfortable with giving his Paper Mario thoughts. I'll pretty much just let him kind of give his spiel because I gave my spiel here. And we will have some more interesting topics to cover next week. Until then, thank you guys for sticking with me, and we will see you all next week. Thank you guys.